Hello again YouTube, and welcome back to Just Get a Tesla. And on this week's video, I've got to ask a really important question. Does it cost more money to run this car, my Tesla Model Y, than my previous car, which used petrol? So this is a 2022 Tesla Model Y long range built in Shanghai, and the previous car was a 2018 Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid petrol. So it had a 2.4 litre engine burning a lot of petrol, but it also had the ability to be able to plug in and do a relatively short distance on electricity. And we'll talk about exactly how far it could go as we get into this. As you can see, I have added a little bit of bling to the Tesla studio because, well, who doesn't like shiny signs telling you whether you're on air or not? And also for this one, you're going to have to forgive me, but I've got a notepad. The reality is I've spent quite a bit of time with my calculator, basically trying to work out all of the different numbers. So there's going to be a few points where I need to look down at the notepad, but there's going to be a whole load of stuff added onto the screen here as well, graphics and things. So don't worry, I'm going to walk you through this. And essentially, we're going to go through 5 different categories. I'm going to talk about how much money I'm paying per month for purchasing the vehicle. I'm going to talk about how much money I'm paying per year to insure the vehicle, the money that's paid for vehicle excise duty. So in the UK, we have a thing that's lovingly referred to as car tax or tax disc, even though it is long since stopped being an actual disc. It's just money you have to pay to the government, and we're probably going to cut that bit out as well. The fourth one is maintenance costs. How much money does it cost to maintain the vehicles in that time? And the fifth one is the cost of fuel. Now that is split into 2 parts, because obviously in the Tesla, all of the fuel is electricity. In the Outlander, some of the fuel was electricity and a lot of it was petrol. So we've got to tot all of those things together. So I've got the numbers, and I was actually surprised when I put it all together, but let's go through that now. So the first section that we're going to look at is monthly payments. Now, the one thing that I am going to exclude is deposits. And you might be screaming at the screen going, but Ian, that has a big impact on how much you're paying. In this case, the deposits are basically money that's already been tied up in a previous vehicle. They're broadly comparable, I think, but the reality is that money is just churned over into cars when you buy and sell them and so on as you go. So we're going to set deposits aside. Actually, I think there was probably more deposit built up in the Outlander than there was in the Tesla, so that really should bias the maths in that direction. But if we look at the monthly payments, how much money am I paying per month to buy the 2 vehicles? So the Tesla, I'm paying £694.94 a month. The Outlander was on a finance loan where I was paying £556.16 a month. So on an annual basis, which is what we're interested in here, that means that the Tesla costs £8,339.28 a year, and the Outlander costs £6,673.92 a year. So on the first one, the Outlander is cheaper. The second one is insurance. You will have seen my previous video, link up here, where I go shopping for insurance for this year for the Tesla. That isn't what we're looking at, because we're looking at my first year of ownership where I did about 20,000 miles. And again, if you haven't seen that video, go and look at that one, but then come back here as well. The insurance deal on the Tesla in the first year was £746.84. I have had a huge amount of feedback from bots mainly screaming at me that the price of insurance for EVs and especially for Teslas is absolutely astronomical. And you know what? It is. But from what I can see, it's astronomical for everybody. And surprisingly, the quote that I had I not sold the Outlander to get the Tesla, that was going to be £634 a year. So 634 quid for the Outlander, 746 quid for the Tesla. It's not a huge difference, guys. So that's what I was quoted, genuine quotes. whilst the Tesla is more expensive, it's not as dramatically so as I thought that it could have been. The third category is vehicle excise duty. Now, for all of my viewers around the world, you will have your own car tax things that you have to pay. In the UK, you have to pay money every year, basically, to run a car. And that is, in the UK, based on two things. One, it's based on the amount of carbon dioxide that your car puts out. And two, we have a thing called the luxury car tax, where basically, if your car costs more than £40,000 a year, they charge you a nice healthy £365, I think, premium on top of that. So the good news is that currently EVs are exempt from both of those. So the VED for this car this year was zero. The previous car, the Mitsubishi Outlander, that had a vehicle excise duty payment every year of £560. Yeah, so it was relatively low on CO2 emissions, but the government had changed the way they were calculating those so that plug-in hybrids were less favoured than they had been previously, and it was subject to the luxury vehicle tax because it cost more than 40 grand when it was new, so 560 quid for the year to tax the car. The fourth category is maintenance. Now again, you're likely to have seen the video that I've done about the £1,300 bill that I had for this car to replace the headlight. However, that isn't included here because this is my first 12 months of ownership versus the previous 12 months of ownership of the Outlander. And in my first 12 months of ownership, the amount of maintenance bills that I had to pay for this vehicle was zero. Nothing. No servicing, no parts, no tyres, no repairs, nothing. And that is something that is, frankly, one of the advantages of Tesla. There is no maintenance schedule. There are no expensive services that you have to be able to maintain the warranty. Nothing. The Outlander had to have a mid-level service, which was £277.13. The Outlander needed servicing every 12,500 miles. So we'll talk about why I'm only counting one of those in a minute, but £277 for a service. And there was also a further little bit of tweaking that needed to be done in the local garage, which was £54.85. So all in all, the Outlander was far more expensive than the Tesla, although relatively speaking, the 330 quid or so that I spent still wasn't a dramatic amount of money. So just to recap, we've done monthly payments where the Tesla is more expensive. We have done insurance where the Tesla is more expensive. We've done vehicle excise duty where the Outlander is more expensive. And we've done maintenance where the Outlander is more expensive. For the fifth and final part, and I think this is going to be the conclusive bit, we're going to talk about fuel costs. So obviously this is an electric car, so all of the fuel is electricity. So the first thing to note is, for all of the charging that I do at home, and at home charging is kind of the bulk of it, at home charging, I use a wall box, which is wired into my business premises because it's all part of the same building, and after tax I'm paying 13.25 pence per kilowatt hour, which is a great deal. That is really helpful, but that obviously counts on both cars. So for the Tesla, I did slightly over 20,000 miles in that year. In fact, looking at the number, I did 20,586 miles. Okay, so I have then looked at every single public charge that I've done. When you go into the Tesla app, it will show you every single charge that you've done, how many kilowatts you bought, and at what price. So via the magic of adding and mathematics, I can work out exactly how much money I've spent on supercharging, and then I've gone back in and I've added on the additional costs of plugging the car into public chargers, such as on Sky. And again, if you haven't seen my Sky video, go and watch that one. Or plugging it in at a hotel where I'm paying to charge, or paying to charge at a car park. Every single one of those charges has been added together, and the total amount of money that I've spent on public charging in a year on this car is £1,297.23p. I've then got to look at how much money have I spent charging the car up at home. And the car is very good at telling you how much power you have consumed in a whole year and how much of that was done at home. To the best of my knowledge, looking at the app and adding it together, I have then spent a further nearly 500 quid on charging at home. So the total amount of money that I have spent on electricity in this car is £1,760.10. And that is to do 20,000, what did I say? 20,586 miles. So it's cost me 8.54 pence per mile to drive the car. That feels like a good deal to me. Okay. This is where we then have to start really trying to think about how do we calculate the same thing for the Outlander. So the first one is that in the year that I had the Outlander before I had the Tesla, I didn't do quite as many miles. I've looked at the average mileage that I did when I had the car across the year and a half that I had it and distilled that down into what I believe was 12 months of mileage, which is 15,648 miles. It's not precise, but it's as close as I'm going to be able to get it. I've then got to think about how often did I charge that car up while it was sat where this car is now before I did every trip, because it's a plug-in hybrid. So it had a 13 kilowatt hour battery, but mine had already been degraded a little bit, and you don't actually burn the top and the bottom of the battery. So if it went to effectively empty, which it did every single time I used it, then I'm putting 10 kilowatt hours of power into the battery. It's not a precise figure, but from a maths perspective, it's as good as I'm going to get. And I've had to think about, well, how often did I actually plug the thing in? It was not used every single day, not every single day. So I looked at, is this 5 days a week? Is this 3 days a week? And in the end, I've come to 4 days a week. So the assumption is that basically 4 times 52 is 208 occasions where I've plugged this car in before going off on a trip. So 208 charges of 10 kilowatt hours is 2,080 kilowatt hours. I would get, at a push, 18 miles on electricity, okay? Sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, but 18 miles was reasonably accurate. So that means that my 10 kilowatt hours of power gets me 18 miles. So every kilowatt hour gets me 1.8 miles. So I did, therefore, using maths, 3,744 miles on electricity in that car. So that leaves 11,904 miles that we need to account for on petrol. Now, this isn't exactly accurate, so I've rounded that up to 12,000 miles, basically just to make the maths easier. So 12,000 miles across 12 months obviously is 1,000 miles a month. I've then gone in and looked at the average fuel price in the United Kingdom in each of those months and put my 1,000 miles of use into it. The Outlander would quite comfortably do a 40 miles an hour average, and again, it's an average. Sometimes it'd be higher, sometimes it'd be lower, but 40 mpg was the benchmark that I used. So 40 miles per gallon is 8.8 miles per litre. And again, if you're not in the United Kingdom, we buy fuel in litres in the UK, despite the fact that we measure distance in miles. So distance in miles, volume in litres, and we use miles per gallon because the United Kingdom is completely stupid. We've never actually got over the imperial metric thing. And by the way, America, your version of imperial isn't even our version of imperial, so your gallon is different to our gallon. The whole thing is complete cobblers. Anyway, if we go through and we do the maths, I would have burned 113.63 litres per month, okay? To do my 1,000 miles a month, I burned 113.63 litres per month. So I then take the cost, using my notepad, and we get to a total of £2,019.09 in fuel bought during the year. We have got £265 of electricity, which is what the 2,080 kilowatt hours would have cost me, and that gets me to a fuel cost of £2,284.09. Now then, this is where I had a decision to make, because that is fuel to do 15,648 miles. And the Tesla did 20,586 miles. And I want to do as level and fair a comparison as I can. So having had a look at basically the two numbers, I have prorated the fuel costs of the Outlander up to the same level as the Tesla one. The other way of doing it, of course, would have been to reduce the amount of mileage that the Tesla did. But of course, if I'm doing that, all I'm doing is reducing the amount of expensive supercharging that I'm doing, because the less trips that I'm doing, the less supercharging that I'm doing. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, guys. So we're going to wind the Outlander mileage up to match the Tesla, and therefore the costs. So that gets us to a pro-rata fuel cost for the Outlander of 3,005 miles and 86 pence. And before anybody says, but Ian, what about the maintenance costs? The Outlander was actually good at maintaining its tires, so I didn't need to buy any tires in the entire time that I had the car, and I did best part of 25,000 miles because it had just been fitted with new boots and they lasted. So no tires needed even with the higher mileage. The maintenance schedule was 12,500 miles, so I only needed one service because I did 15,500. But even if I had done 20,500, I still wouldn't have needed another service. We could go on the basis of basically putting money away for the things that we know are going to come back as costs later, but I can't be bothered doing any of that with the calculations for this. It just gets messy. So if I had to spend the money, it goes in the book. If I didn't spend the money, it doesn't. So that gets us to 5 categories and 5 sets of numbers. For the Tesla, the monthly cost was £8,339.28. The insurance cost was £746.84. The vehicle excise duty was 0, maintenance was 0, fuel costs £1,760.10. So the annual running costs of this car last year was £10,846.22. The Outlander monthly cost was lower, £6,673.92. Insurance cost was lower, £634, but the VED was higher at £560. The maintenance cost was higher at £331.98. The fuel cost was higher at £3,005.86, which gives a total of £11,205.76. Now again, some of the Outlander costs on fuel and mileage are my best guess. I simply don't have the exact data, but what I can do is take what I did with a Tesla and replicate it as best as I can with the Outlander using a live fuel pricing and all the rest of it, as I have done. And the simple reality is that the Outlander costs more to run than this Tesla, but not by a huge amount. 11,205 plays 10,846. So it was closer than I thought. But there is a coda. Here is the other difference between me running this Tesla Model Y and me previously running the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. This is a company car. The Outlander was a personal car. And that makes a huge difference, because this is a company car and it's owned by my company, which means that this car is effectively pre-tax. The car is a deductible from the amount of money before I pay tax. The Outlander was post-tax. I earn money, I pay tax on the money, and then from what I've got left, I pay for the costs of the Outlander. So already, before we start faffing around with this, 11,200 quid of post-tax spend is actually more, and quite a lot more, than 10,800 pounds of pre-tax spend. But I have had a look at what the actual tax savings are, and in having this car run through my business, I am actually saving in a year, this is in a year, £2,726 of corporation tax, and I'm saving a further £363 of VAT. So if you take those numbers off, it means that whilst the Outlander's still costing £11,205.76, the Tesla has cost £7,757.22. So suddenly it was close, and now it isn't. There is, how can I put this? 3.5 grand is a lot of money. 3.5 grand is the real world difference for me with my situation of running this car versus running the Outlander. And you know what? I really liked the Outlander. In fact, I liked the Outlander so much that I've had two of them. The one that appears in the pictures that you've seen, that was my second. There was a previous one, a black one, and it was actually a decent car. And when our uses had changed again, we bought another one. So there's nothing at all wrong with the Outlander. It's a great car. And I think 40 mpg, even for the diesel one, would be good. But with the plug-in hybrid system, it was fab to drive because it was actually really clever. But the difference is, it's not this. This car is cheaper than my previous car. This car is so much more fun than my previous car, and although Mitsubishi had done Herculean improvements in build quality as they had gone through the cycle of building that Outlander, it was still a bit, what's the phrase I'm looking for? 90s Japanese retro, okay? With, things in odd places and buttons. There was some of the buttons to do with, the safety systems were over there and some were over there. And people complain about, well, Tesla, everything's on a screen. But at least on a screen, you kind of get your way through it. With the Mitsubishi, I didn't have a clue where half the things were, and I owned two of them because they were just randomly strewn in. And I was driving the top spec car, and there's blanks. Why have you got button blanks on the top spec car? What space have you left for features which you don't offer? You don't need to worry about that with Tesla. They just update the software. I found this to be a really interesting exercise to do. I genuinely, when I started, didn't really know what the numbers were going to come out at. So it has been interesting to go through and see just how much saving I have actually made in having this car. And that's the best thing. It's a brilliant car, it's a whole load of fun, and it saved me money. Next time anyone says to you that Tesla is really expensive, is it? And this is the thing, if you're thinking about buying one, okay, if you're thinking about buying one, you're watching channels like mine, hi, thanks, and you're thinking about how do all of these things add up, it's really important to think about costs like insurance, because certainly in the UK, everybody's insurance has gone up by an enormous amount, and some cars are quite difficult now to insure. If you've got a Range Rover, you might struggle to insure it at all because they're either stolen or set Luton Airport car parks on fire. But this car is in group 48 on the insurance, and there's only 50 groups, which is why it costs so much. But despite that, and despite the Outlander being quite a lot of groups lower, the actual insurance costs before the recent escalation weren't really that different. So insurance is going to be a big thing. Okay, you really do need to look at that, and you need to think about how you're going to be plugging the car in and where you're going to be plugging it in and what that costs. But then compare that to your actual fuel, gas, petrol, call it what you want, costs. You're probably going to find that the cost of running one of these is significantly lower than a petrol or diesel car, especially if you've got a big gas guzzling car at the moment where it's just drinking fuel. This is going to be cheaper, and it's a question of how far are you going to go. The more you drive it, the more money you save, and in my case, because I'm doing decent mileage, that's why the saving is relatively high as it is. I hope you found that video interesting. I found it interesting researching it. The good thing is I have got actually quite a few road trips now in November and December, so I'm going to be in this car quite a lot as we go through the winter when it's going to be at its least efficient, and you're going to be here with me, hopefully. So we're going to find out what running this car through the winter is like, and now that I've done the maths and I've seen that it actually is cheaper, I'm not going to feel quite as bad about it. And on that happy note, I'm going to end the video here. Thanks so much for watching to the end. Like and subscribe as always, hit the bell icon. So many new people have come in to the channel, which is fantastic. Genuinely, I am blown away by the response that I've been getting for the last month or so. If you haven't seen some of my previous videos, go back through the catalogue, have a look at some of those. It really helps the channel because it just pushes the numbers ever higher. And I will see you all very soon back here on Just Get a Tesla.